Hello and welcome to Aquarium Dilemmas. I'm your host, ScienceGal Aquatics. I'm Kerri, and this is my co-host,
Jesse, and welcome to another wonderful episode. Thank you for tuning in.
Yes, thank you so much for listening to these podcast episodes. We really do appreciate it. And today is going to be a topic that I don't really know how to describe it, so I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't necessarily want you to hate doing water changes. So these are just kind of some tips and some tricks that I've learned to help me do less water changes. So I've learned to really enjoy this times because I don't feel so overwhelmed and just that I need to get it done and just rush through it. So I've learned some tips that I just want to hopefully share with you today that's kind of made the process a little bit more balanced to my schedule, and so it's just more enjoyable overall.
Oh yeah, that month, that weekly or bi-weekly, every other week water change that some people just absolutely dread. Well, how can we kind of stretch those water changes out a little bit?
Because I really enjoy feeding time and the time that I get to spend while I maintenance my tanks. I feel like that's the time I can observe, I get to know their personalities, I can just sit back, and feeding time is just, to me, I really enjoy watching them eat whatever treat that I give them. But also with maintenance too, I try to make it to where they're not sloshing around in the tank or have to worry about getting siphoned through the aquarium vac. I take my time and I don't want to rush through it. But there was a time where I think I had just a little bit too much fish, too many tanks, and I felt like I had to do water changes every week at a certain time. I had to drain a certain amount of water. And I don't want to say that water changing, if you have a tank with a heavy bio load and you have to water change every week, by all means do that. But with the fish that I keep, they have a lower bio load. It's not there's not a whole bunch of overcrowding going on. And I didn't necessarily have to. My levels were good. There was no need to do that except for what I thought. So some aquariums, 100%, they need water changed once a week, maybe twice a week. And others, if it's a low bio load and it's heavily planted and you don't overfeed, then you don't necessarily have to water change every Monday at 5:30. You can you don't have to feel that stress. So these are just some things that I've picked up that I've learned that has just made the process, it's fun to come down here, either listen to a live chat or a podcast and just do some tank maintenance. It's fun, but I don't have that pressure because I kind of have helped myself.
Oh yeah. I think it goes to, for me, the plants and the substrate you put in. If you have a low bio load fish, you put in a layered type of substrate, whatever you want, your own kind of buffering substrate or something to feed the plants, and then with sand on top of that. If you have a low bio load fish, it's going to hide that waste. It's going to allow that waste to go into the sand, and the plants are going to get that nutrients out of it. So there's a lot of give and take, a little bit of room in there. And the other one is a lid, evaporation.
Yeah. But I think even going back a step further, I think the most important part of this is a time where I highly recommend, if you want to experiment kind of with your water change schedule, that this is when I do tests. I highly recommend, like, water changes, that you do them and you do test your water. But this is the time that you can really evaluate where your nitrates, your ammonia, and your nitrites, everything's at. So you're like, well, it's not elevated like I thought it would be. I think they'll be okay. It's not, my levels aren't that high. But it does, like you said, comes down to a lot of different factors. The fish you have in there, your substrate, the tank setup, your schedule, and there's all kinds of things. So
I haven't done it, but it would be a cool thing to do while we're sitting here talking about this, to actually redo one of our tanks and test it with substrate without plants in it, and then start seeing the progression of how much longer we can go once we start to plant it. And the
well, I
plants
just
start
know
to take
from
over.
personal experience from all the years that I have been keeping fish, and through the years that I would water change, but I don't know why I was I couldn't tell you a single reason behind why I was, except my dad told me to. It seemed like back then it was Tuesdays I would change 20%, and I had not a clue why. And again, research is super important so you can understand. I like to help explain things in the podcast and the live stream channel, or the live chats in my YouTube channel, but there's nothing like you physically researching it yourself and learning about that topic. I want to help share what I know. But like going back to what you said, substrate, I find that a layered substrate with a sand cap, I really like sand in my tanks, and I never would have thought that when I first started. I just stuck with the aquarium gravel, and I thought that was all I could put into a fish tank. But researching and experimenting, that's the fun part of this hobby. But I find for me that I don't have to do as many water changes when it comes to having either a dirted tank with a sand cap, or a fluval stratum with some sand, or some creek gravel with a sand cap. And I've experienced, or experimented with putting some gravel and then some sand and some gravel again. And you don't want to over clean either. Like you said, you want some of that debris to kind of, especially if you're trying to breed, if you have a fish that's laying eggs and you don't want them eaten, sometimes that gravel, those eggs can kind of fall in between that empty space, and it kind of helps with breeding. But I know with having live plants and a low bioload fish, it just helps with, especially with the sand. I feel like with my tanks, I don't have the algae buildup on the glass as bad. But again, it might be my luck where I live, and someone that lives in a different state might have a different experience. So I know that having a really good, healthy, built-up substrate, and it's not going to happen overnight. You can't set substrate in your tank and expect to do less water changes instantly. I feel like my tanks being mature, they've been set up for many years now, to the point where I've added some extra substrate too for the plants.
Well, yeah, that comes into what they call old tank syndrome, when your tank everything in it starts going past.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel that I was going with the substrate of that. Yeah, that's why we layer it. And so it's rejuvenating. We're putting more minerals back into it's for the plants.
But just because you're doing less water changes, you still have to pay. That's a whole other, you still have to monitor the plants. I love having live plants in my tanks, and I think that's one of the biggest miracle tricks you can do if you want to do less water changes, is just simply adding floating plants, planted aquarium, whatever type of plants you can get to. But having that mature, healthy bacteria that's built up over time in that substrate or in your filter, I feel like that's an important part of when you talk about the substrate, is really having a really healthy, just bacteria colony built up in that too.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we just had one of our really nice friends over, and he's new to the hobby, and he's just now wanting to put some plants in a tank. Knows nothing about plants, absolutely nothing. And he's seen your filters and was like, hey, and was checking that out. And he was like, oh, there's this little bit of moss and kind of stuff in your filters, and you guys don't really clean that out. I'm like, no, that's just more area for that beneficial bacteria to hang on.
Out, but again,
we clean it out, but we don't strip it dry.
Yeah.
So it's just more surface area for that to hang on to, and it's not hurting anything, and it's not even an eyesore. It almost kind of covers up the filter, and it almost looks like it's a little plant right there.
Yeah, adding extra surface area of whatever sort, whether it's an aquarium sponge or extra biomedia, whatever you can use or get a hold of that's going to have surface area for extra beneficial bacteria to grow on in your filter is a huge advantage to this, because all of that beneficial bacteria, whether it's your substrate or your filter, just all of that. And it lives on the plants too, just everything in that has surface area that will mature, and you want that healthy beneficial bacteria colony, and that's going to help you. And I think that's something you can't rush through, and having that healthy beneficial bacteria in your tank is going to definitely help you extend your water changes a little bit. But again, you don't want to over clean. And I know I definitely have, I don't know, some floating plants that kind of go up into those filters. It's just some algae buildup, and it helps filter that water. And it doesn't get to the point where it's growing to the point where you don't want a smelly fish tank. And that's a whole other topic we'll come to. But I would say every 3 or 4 months, during a water change, I'll kind of just lightly scrub it with my hands in that tank water I just took back out of the tank, and then I'll put that back in the filter. But generally, I just kind of leave it alone for the most part. If it's, got a massive piece of algae, every once in a while I might clean it off. But I typically just leave that alone because I just want that healthy bacteria to grow and help me filter my water.
Oh yeah, that's the name of the game in my mind. From really learning about the nitrogen cycle and everything, is getting that. And as slow as beneficial bacteria grows and reproduces, the more surface area you have in a tank, as far as, again, your biomedia in your filter, your plants, your substrates, all that, the more area you have, once it finally can get through all of your tank and overcome your tank and completely be equalized out through the whole tank, you're going to notice when you test a big difference.
Yeah, and one main factor, well, I think it's a huge factor. I guess main factor is a good word too. When it comes to doing less water changes, and so it's not so much of a chore, is really cutting back on feeding. I was overfeeding a lot. And when it comes to having that bacteria in your tank, you don't want to overload it to cause a bacteria bloom to happen. It's a tricky thing to keep that balanced and healthy, because when it's balanced and healthy, you have a really nice crystal clear tank, and whether planted or not. But a lot of ways that you can control that to make sure your colony is healthy, your fish are happy and healthy, and you don't have to constantly just clean out old food, is control your feeding, because it's going to break down. Your fish are going to produce more waste, and then that's when you're going to have a spike, and you're going to have to do some extra water changes. So make sure you feed just what your fish can eat, because you don't want to have a bunch of uneaten food that's just going to mold or fungus, and then it's going to throw that colony out of whack. Because you want to keep that all, even if it's something you don't even see, but it's hugely important to just the overall health of your aquarium. And we say that constantly.
And the overall health of your fish. We're not telling you to starve your fish, but believe it or not, 90% of people overfeed their fish.
It's not even about I'm still guilty of it. But I would throw food. I've gone through ranges where I've thrown food in there all the time, to once a day, but tons of food. And you really want to watch how much. Start with just a pinch. And if they seem to still be just maybe need a little bit more, just do a tiny bit more. But just let them eat to where you're not having all of that waste, because all of that waste just breaking down, and you're going to have just unnecessary spikes. You're going to have to do unnecessary water changes just because you're overfeeding.
Well, and then you're going into that by overfeeding, or any way you're putting too much excess waste into that tank, whether it be the overfeeding or however, then you're having to go into that gravel vac. So then you're taking more water out. You're doing a lot bigger water change trying to get that waste out. And that is what takes up your time. You really don't want to do it. You'd rather just enjoy your fish tank. This is what we're talking about.
Yeah, 'cause
this is the main goal of this dilemma. Is how can I just every 2 weeks just pull out a few gallons?
Well, and it really, if you have, I've had plecos, and I still have plecos that are plecosomus, that no matter what, they just produce a really heavy bioload. And they still, like the silver arowana, we have to naturally feed him a lot more than the guppies. So it is species specific. But you can sit back and feed your fish and let them have a minute or two to eat that. And then either, like, I can go a day or two comfortably and the fish are fine. But I do typically like to feed them at least once a day. But they are completely okay with a day or two. But even that, it's just, I try to keep it light because I do have a tendency to overfeed. So even if I do overfeed, I feed just a little bit. And the fish continue to breed. They're very healthy. They're colorful. They swim around actively. They didn't need handfuls of food, and then it would just mold, and then I would have a mess. And then, of course, I had smaller aquariums, so it took a couple large water changes to get that all out. So I never gave the tank time to recover before I was adding tons more food in there, and nothing was ever balanced. And then I was beginning to really dread water changing and maintaining these tanks when it's completely one of the best times that I enjoy now, coming down here and, fiddling and maintaining and water changing. But a lot of that had to do with me overfeeding and creating a huge mess for myself that was completely unnecessary. So just monitor your fish. Like you said, we don't want you to starve your fish. If they're healthy and happy being fed twice a day, then feed them twice a day, but just smaller amounts.
Absolutely.
And see what happens. If they're like the silver arowana that needs to be fed a lot more than these guppies, then that's what they need. But just be aware that the more waste, the more food, the more excess stuff that's breaking down is going to cause you to do more water changes. So the tip to do less water changes is just feed what makes them healthy and happy, and don't overfeed them. Even when they come up with those cute little fishy eyes and just beg for it, don't.
Yeah. If you don't overfeed, don't over clean.
Yeah, don't over clean. Don't wipe out your bacteria cycle or nitrogen cycle.
And then the next one is, if it is planted and all of that, just make sure you are on a schedule that we have not been on for a long time, but we are way better at it now. Lights. Turn your lights off. Let's not make extra algae for yourself.
Yeah. I have definitely been guilty of having to do my levels were fine. My everything was good, but and the fish, some of my aquariums, honestly, if I'm wanting them to breed, do breed a little bit better with some algae buildup. But saying that, there's a point when you don't ever turn off your light and it just looks like, I don't even know, seaweed in the current or seagrass or so. It's just too much. I'm creating just a mess for myself. Some people like green water. I prefer green water outside of my tubs versus inside in my tanks, but I was just creating a huge mess again for myself when all you have to do is put your tanks on a proper light cycle. Do yourself a favor, and it does The fish need time to rest too. I know with the guppies, when I would leave them on all the time, it wasn't doing them any favors. And now that I do much better. I do much better, probably because I've ratted myself out so much online talking about it. But those fish need time to rest and go down to the bottom. The guppies, like, you see them kind of rest at the bottom. Some fish may not do that. But I know the silver arowana doesn't spend much time hanging out at the bottom. But
Nope,
it's
he just
nice.
slows way
It's nice
down.
for them to have some dark time. And it's good for you to not create an algae, green water mess for yourself. So turn off your lights and it will definitely help you do less water changes and less scraping on the glass to get all that algae that's going to be stuck to the glass and everything else at the bottom, sides, filter, everywhere.
Yes. The point of it is, if you are doing these few simple things properly and testing, you will notice a dramatic change in the fact that the extension of how long your water quality, and I call it water quality, is going to last you before you're like, oh, look, I'm starting to get a little bit of a nitrate spike now. I was almost at zero for a week and a half, 2 weeks. Now I'm finally on this third week. I'm starting to get a little spike here now. By doing these just few little simple things, it dramatically changes the amount of water you have to change and how often you have to do it.
Yeah, and each tank's so different. And I had the mindset, and I did this to myself. I still have quite a few tanks. I have 20-something tanks on the inside. And I felt like I had to do all my water changes once a week at Mondays at blah, blah, blah time. And that's just, they all needed this amount of water. No matter what was going on, I was going to get those. And it was really stressful. And now that I've got them all pretty much heavily planted, again, they're low bio-load fish. Each tank is different, and some of the smaller tanks do need a little extra maintenance, whereas the 55-gallon tank that's heavily planted, it's got a pretty large community of guppies in there. That tank, and it's very low filtered. I think it's got an air stone on it.
It doesn't even have a filter on it.
I don't think it has one on it. But that one,
it has an air stone.
Honestly, when we do testing, it doesn't need water changes, but honestly, like once a month. And everything does. There's Neocaridina shrimp in there, and everything's breeding and reproducing. We feed them a variety of food, from flakes, pellets, wafers. We don't feed frozen as much, but we do feed them frozen food occasionally. And that tank doesn't need maintenance like some of the other ones. Whereas a 10-gallon one that's a little heavier stocked for a 10-gallon, it doesn't have as many as the 55-gallon, and it's still heavily planted. But sometimes those levels are just a little bit higher. And so you don't have to feel like you have to get it done all at once. This is the time where you can kind of play with each tank you have, or you just have that one focal point in your living room, and that's your one, you just have that one tank.
Oh yeah, you just got that one tank. You can kind of
play and see. I'm not recommending that you're, okay, I'm going to stop doing water changes, I'm going to do these things, and I'm not going to do anything and just see. You still have to kind of, have fun and experiment, but I don't want you to just not do water changes. But I feel like turning off your lights, really paying attention to how much you're feeding.
Yes, but what Kerri, what ScienceGal is saying here is, by the testing and experimenting, what you're saying is, I might be able to test, and instead of what you were talking about earlier, I used to every Tuesday do 20%. Now you test and look, and over that period of time, you're like, hey, no, I can do 5 or 10% on that schedule that I was, or I can go even longer and still
Yeah,
and do less. And I can only I could do less. I only need to take out 10% water and put 10% back because the tank's still actually doing really, really well.
Yeah, you just have to kind of have fun and play a little bit, but don't go from one extreme to the other. Just have fun, get to know your tank, and enjoy it. Because I guess the whole point of this episode really comes to, I just don't want you to feel like this time is a chore, because it can be so much fun to maintenance your tank. And I really did, I just didn't even want to get stuff out. I did not enjoy that part of things for a while. Just getting out a bucket, I was like, and now that I've got more plants, I've, learned to know when I should do a water change and when I can kind of, like you said, take a little bit less out. If I know I have a trip coming up or something, I might do a water change once a week, but like you said, take 5% out because I know it'll be good. Or if I'm going to be out of town unexpectedly and I don't have time for a water change, I know that tank's going to be okay. I'm not going to be stressed about it. It's going to be okay. But when it comes to just tips, it's definitely just don't overfeed. That's the biggest one that caused me so much heartache, is just don't overfeed your fish and turn off your lights.
Mine is lights and surface area, plants, substrate. Change that filter out, get rid of all those cartridges, pack that thing full of as much biomedia, foam, any extra amount of surface area you can get the most beneficial bacteria you can get going. And the more of that you have on your side, no matter what size, in my mind, no matter a 10-gallon to a 180-gallon tank.
Well, it's just the biggest thing.
The most beneficial bacteria you can get working for you is going to save you on those water changes. It's going to make, when you test that, it's going to make the difference. You're going to go, wow, I can't believe it's still testing this good.
I think it's a huge, just, if anybody can share anything with a fish keeper that's new or even experienced. Sometimes I like to think I've been fish keeping a long time, but I'm not as experienced as even still others. But sharing the nitrogen cycle, talking about beneficial bacteria, and really giving that tank a chance in the beginning to mature and establish, and having that extra surface area for that beneficial bacteria to grow, and it helps you so much with the overall just balance and health of your fish tanks.
Well, and it's something you can't see. That's what I didn't understand in the beginning, because I am still brand new. So I can speak from the heart on this. I am brand new. It's something you can't see. And the only way you know it's working for you is by testing. And then once it finally, you start testing and it's taking over, you can totally tell a difference from the time you set that tank up to when it starts to mature. And you're like, whoa, this is really happening. You can't see it. You don't, it's there, but you can't physically see it. It's not like your fish or your plants or anything you can put in and physically touch and see. Yeah. It's so interesting in that aspect.
Yes, and I was oblivious to it for so long, and that's definitely a huge tip, that even if you know, like I know the nitrogen cycle, but it's still good to brush up on it and go over it, because you can never know it enough. And it seems like there's always something to learn that helps you. And it's just a huge, huge factor that you can't just skip over. Especially if you want to do a little less water changes, or when you do water changes, have a little less volume come out. It's just something it's vastly important.
Well, and I know we already did an episode on the nitrogen cycle lightly.
Yeah, so go check that out.
And check that out for sure. We will have to do another one, because that is a main, in my mind, aquarium person's dilemma, that you don't even know it's a dilemma until you look at your tank and you're like, I'm having to do all these water changes. There's a bacteria bloom. There's algae bloom. There's this, there's that. There's what's wrong with the fish. It all comes back to that nitrogen cycle. And until you get your head wrapped around that thing and that beneficial bacteria, you're kind of lost. And when you turned me on to that, that really got me going.
Well, it's not that you're lost. You can totally keep. I kept aquariums for many years not knowing the nitrogen cycle, but I definitely ran into a lot of challenges, and I just did not know what I was doing when I thought I was doing everything right. So it's a huge help just in your overall fish keeping to learn it and brush up on it. No matter what, it's just helpful. But when it comes to just tips and tricks to doing less water changes, along with just having a good, healthy, beneficial bacteria, again, it's just watch your feeding and keep your lights turned on a proper light cycle. And there's always going to be hiccups. There's always something that you might have to do an extra. There's always something. The kids get into the food accidentally and you do have a mess, or something gets, it seems like, I don't know, it's just always something. The rabbit accidentally got out and I had some rabbit fur on the fish tank. So there's just always hiccups and like uh-ohs. But generally speaking, these are some things that have drastically helped. And just like I said before, I don't want this to be a chore, and just going into it that, you know, this is the time to really, you learn so much about the fish you keep when you're just undisturbed and you get to sit back and watch your fish. And whether it's feeding them, maintaining your tank, or you're just coming down to your fish room or your living room or wherever it is you keep your tanks, just being able to watch them. And there's nothing more that you want than a healthy, balanced aquarium. So, you know, I hope this helped just not make it feel like a chore, and that it's something that you can enjoy and it's a fun time. Oh,
it's an awesome time. And it's the time, again, test and figure out what you want to experiment with. Where are you headed in your fish keeping hobby? What's your dream to do?
But thank you for listening. And if you check this out and want to watch this, I guess if you want to watch this, you should check this out on ScienceGal Aquatics and the memberships. It's 99 cents if you want to watch this podcast. But just thank you for listening, and I hope this helped. And until the next episode, thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.